You're listening to The Artist Athlete, episode 32. This podcast is dedicated to CIRCUS. It's a place for professionals in the industry to share their stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for outsiders to get a sneak peek into this world. Hey friends, fans, and enemies, I'm Shannon McKenna, and I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast and the founder of theartistathlete.com. This podcast is sponsored through the generous donations of listeners like you. We are getting so close to our first goal of $500 a month, which means that this podcast can totally sustain itself. If you want to help us reach our goal, go to www.patreon.com/theartistathlete and sign up to be a Patreon. All payments are secure, and you can give as little as $1. Each one counts. Again, go to patreon.com/theartistathlete to become a Patreon today. My guest today is Wes Peden. Wes is an American juggler from Rochester, New York, now living in Stockholm, Sweden. His father, Jeff Peden, taught him to juggle when he was 5 and started performing with him when he was 11. In 2007, Wes started to study juggling at the Dance and Circus University of Stockholm. He has been voted the world's most popular juggler 8 times and holds 6 world records. For juggling, that is. Maybe he also holds other world records, but I couldn't find anything about those online. He regularly performs and releases juggling videos. The most recent is called Gumball. His energetic, complex, and playful juggling style has won him awards from the International Juggling Association and the festival Cirque du Soleil. Wes takes inspiration from sumo wrestling, fast food packaging, and 1950s playgrounds. Here's my interview with Wes Peden. Wes Peden, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Can you say a little bit in your own words, introduce yourself and say what you do?
I am a juggler from the States. I've been juggling for 23 years, and I kind of specialize in clubs, but I do balls and rings and mix prop and invent my own props. And I guess I'm known for kind of creating a bunch of tricks and filming a bunch of videos. So yeah, that's basically me.
Would you say clubs are your favorite props?
You know, it really changes. It used to be when I was growing up, that was my main prop, but now I don't really see juggling in like a prop versus prop thing. I more have like an idea of a technique or a style that I want to juggle in. And then my favorite prop at the time is whatever fits in that style the best. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, okay, I'm working on making these circles or making these triangles or whatever. And like, okay, balls work best for these circle-y tricks and clubs work best for the triangle-y tricks. So it's kind of whatever helps me do the juggling I want to do at the time.
It seems like your work is very much like you think of it very visually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's rare. I don't know if I ever think a trick is good if I don't like the way it looks. So yeah, it's definitely like the visual aspect of it is a large percentage of whether I think it's a good trick or not.
Do you ever hit a trick that like feels really good to do but doesn't look good?
Oh, all the time. And it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating when it feels good to do and it feels like it's probably going to look good. And then I film it and then I look and I'm like, oh, that hurts. That's not good.
No.
It can work the other way as well. If I'm like, oh, that, it doesn't feel that cool. And then, one of my buddies is watching it and it's like, oh, that's dope. I'm like, really? And then I film it. I'm like, oh, yeah, that feels ridiculous, but it actually looks pretty cool.
I feel like that's even worse because then you're like, oh, this feels horrible, but I have to do it now because it's awesome.
Yeah. Sometimes if it's a painful one, but sometimes it can end up being like an easy trick that I can tend to think like that's not worth doing because it seems so easy, which is kind of a weird way of thinking, but anyway, sometimes I think it might not be worth it. And then I realized even though it's easy, it looks great and looks new. So then it's the best of luck when you get an easy, good looking trick.
Yeah, something that I think is really interesting about your work is it seems like you have like kind of a theme of movement or a theme of something you're working on, and you explore variations within it. Do you ever hit a theme that has no variation?
Yeah, sometimes I'll find a technique that I'm like, oh, I like the way the club flips around my hand like this. I bet there's 50 other variations of that, and then it's going to make a whole world, and I'm going to make a new routine out of it. And then I, research with it for a few days, and I find that the first trick that I found was basically the best one, and none of the things really spread out from there, and then it kind of dies in the back of my notebook, and I move forward. So the ones that actually get out there into shows or videos are the ones that worked, but there's many left on the drawing room floor.
Have you ever thought of doing a video that's just all the tricks that go nowhere?
Yeah, I mean, like I do post some stuff, like there's one for Gumball and one for the PX4 video that are like bonus tricks. And those are like all the tricks that weren't good enough to go in the actual video. And then you'll see some that, look like nothing else that I'm doing. And often those I'm like, oh, this is going to be a thing. And then if it leads nowhere, that's kind of where it ends up, is in like a bonus video. And then maybe someone else sees it and then they realize a side of it that can go further and they can develop it for themselves. But yeah.
How do you determine what looks good? I feel like that's a really tricky question to answer, but I'm interested in it because there are some things that like everybody knows looks cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so interested to know, like, when you're just alone, like watching your own video and you have no feedback, like, how do you determine those things? Or is it just because you've been doing this for so long?
I think if I can look at 10 tricks and just kind of pick my favorite, and then I try to define why that trick is my favorite. I'm like, oh, I don't just want to say I like it. I'm like, all right, I like it because I'm using the momentum of the club to change the way it flips down to making it flip side. The function of it is interesting, and as well, the peak of the club and the catch of the club is at the same time, so you get an off sync to a synchronous thing. And I'm like, all right, that means I must like momentum twisting and async to synchronous catches. And then even though that sounds pretty like
cerebral.
Yeah, exactly. Based on that definition of what I like, I can kind of search after more tricks that I like, and I kind of refine my taste. So yeah, if I kind of look at a trick and think just out of instinct, I like it, define why I like it, then that can help me find more that I like and kind of define my opinion of things, I guess. Yeah, is that useful at all?
No, yeah, that's super useful. I'm so interested, like, because it's so great and it's so clear when I watch your work that like you've thought critically about these kinds of things. Yeah. And I like think about little Wes at like 5 years old, and like, were you thinking that way when you were 5 practicing?
No, not at all. I mean, absolutely, it was just like, wanting to do the tricks that I saw other people do for many, many years. And it didn't get to be like an opinion of how things looked and trying to make a unique style of juggling until I moved to Sweden and was starting to get into the school and developing my own style of what I thought me plus juggling was, and not just learning some techniques and throwing some stuff together without a lot of thought behind it.
Yeah, so I think for the listeners who don't know you, maybe it would be helpful to give a little bit of information about your background. I feel like I kind of dove in really fast. Yeah, so you started juggling when you were 5. Why?
Well, when my dad was a juggler and still is a juggler, his name is Wes Peden, and he already had like an hour-long solo juggling show, when I was born. So there was always juggling props around the house. There was juggling videos, juggling books, and he was working on his show and performing all the time. So I saw him doing that constantly. So in the beginning, it was just something I wanted to do to hang out with my dad and, impress him and stuff like that. And he was always really supportive, like teaching me a trick before he went to work, and then I'd work on it while he was gone so I could show him when he came back. He would buy me books and clubs, and he was really, really supportive and taught me a ton. And by the time I was 11, I started performing with him and doing like a duet show. And I performed with him doing about 100 shows a year until I was 17. And then I moved to Sweden to go to the Circus and Dance University there, studied there for 3 years and graduated, and have been based in Europe since then.
I have to wonder, because I know so many people who, when they start kind of younger, they don't generally go to school because they're already working.
Right. Yeah.
I wonder what compelled you to go to Sweden.
Yeah, I guess it was a lot of the videos that I saw online of like Maxim Camaro and Billy Vallo and Jay Gilligan were all doing like a different style of juggling than what I saw in the States. And it felt like if I was going to do shows in the States, like similar to what I was doing with my dad, it was juggling and comedy, or juggling and motivational speech, or juggling and teaching about, dietary habits and stuff like that in schools, which is not at all like a bad thing, but it's just I wanted to do shows that were like just juggling about the juggling, and it felt like that was more a thing that you could do in Europe. And so that was one reason why I wanted to move there in general. And I felt like I could learn more about how to create new juggling tricks and how to compose juggling pieces and shows in school, whereas I could only really work on technique by myself when I was at home in the States.
What was the most valuable non-juggling skill or idea you learned at school?
I guess like just getting my body moving a bit more. Like I had a bunch of dance class and acro class and improvisation and different clown courses that I really enjoyed. That even though it's clowning, it's more just basic ideas of like how to be on stage and be comfortable and telling a story and stuff like that. I guess those are the base things outside of juggling class that really helped me, with how to perform outside of just the technique and making new juggling. Is just how to be there and be comfortable in your body. Have
you ever performed without juggling?
That's a good question. I've definitely been in shows where I was in scenes where I don't juggle. Like I'm in a show now that's premiering soon. We've been rehearsing for like a month. I'm in Helsinki, and there's a scene where, I'm just in a wedding dress doing a dance piece on a table, and not doing it in that scene at all. But I don't think I've ever like been hired to do an act that didn't involve juggling. I really like juggling, so I try to.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be kind of insane to hire you and not juggle.
I like other ways of being on stage for sure. Yeah, there's one part in this new show where I'm just an assistant to Cupid, and I'm handing her arrows for her to shoot. And that part's really fun. I like clowning and dancing around on stage, and I'm in the acro scene doing some backflips and stuff. So I like that, but I definitely wouldn't say yes to be in a show that I didn't do any juggling in.
Can you tell me more about the show you're working on right now?
It's a family show. It's called Hulirut, and it's a winter circus that happens every year in Helsinki. We have 11 circus artists and a live band, and we've been working on the show for about a month and a half. We're going to premiere in a few weeks and play like 80 shows. Let's see, what more to say about it. It's a show a bunch of my friends have done in the past that they're like, it's fun. It's a lot of work, but you get like really solid at whatever you're performing in it. They let you kind of invite some of your friends to work with you. So I knew the director from doing another show with her in Helsinki, and she was like, "Yeah, do you want to come do this show? And is there anyone that you would like to do it with and that you would recommend for the show?" I was like, "Yeah, my girlfriend Florence is also a juggler. We would love to have a contract together, and it gives us a chance to make a piece together." So we're each doing a solo, and we're doing a new duet with sticks in it. And yeah, it's just going to be a fun like Christmas show. It's based on love, so there's
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be cool. Well, I'll send you the trailer when it's up. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd love to see it. How long does it usually take you to make a juggling act? And I know that's kind of a hard question because they vary in time and purpose.
That's a hard thing to say now, because it's also been quite a while that I just made an act. These days I've been mostly working on I have two shows, one called Volcano versus Palm Tree, that the one I played at IJA. I have another one called Zebra, and I've been working on those for the last few years. And okay, but let me give you a real answer. If I was gonna make an act now, or last time I made an act, maybe like 3 months or something to pick the tricks, clean up the transitions, practice the technique, get the music and the costume. Maybe around that, if I'm gonna give a clear answer. Yeah, maybe 3 months.
But you say like you're still working on Palm Trees vs. Volcano?
Always. I'm always working on my shows because they need to be better. Even when something I feel like everything that I do can always be improved. Yeah, and if I stop improving it, I don't feel like I'm having fun with it anymore. Because I'm also constantly evolving as a juggler, and what I think is like the best thing to do in every situation. Or if I come up with a new trick that I'm like, oh, this new 3-club trick would actually fit really well in the context of that 3-club routine and help that part be even more. So I'm trying to, even if it's little tiny things, help them get better and better all the time.
That's so interesting. Because like as a creative, like I hear this in all versions, right? Even filmmakers, people are like, the work is never done. You just kind of stop it in a place that's kind of interesting to stop it and show it to people. But I feel like as performers, we have the opportunity to kind of keep making the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's different with when I've made like videos, because those, when they're done, they're done. But when I have live shows, and especially when it's something that, I'm in so many different show projects. Like now I'm doing this show here for 4 months, and then afterwards I'm going to re-rehearse Zebra and then go perform it. And, during that rehearsal time, when you're relearning the stuff that you made before, I don't want to relearn something that I don't think is the best thing. So as I'm relearning it, if I find a part that I'm like, this isn't the best it could be, I'm going to fix it as I'm making it. So kind of each time I bring a show back to the stage, I try to make sure I still agree with every moment in it.
How long until it becomes a different thing?
Yeah. I guess usually the spirit of my shows have stayed the same. Like I talked to someone recently who saw Volcano versus Palm Tree just when I first performed it, when it was like 15 minutes long, and I didn't have inflatable palm trees, and I didn't have yoga balls, I didn't have flowers. I just had like 3 juggling pieces while I'm wearing a flower outfit. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not the same show, or is it? I don't know.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it is a weird question of like, when should I just stop that and start making a whole new show,
But this is like, I did want to ask about this, like the difference in creating something for the stage versus creating a video like Gumball.
Yeah.
Because I should say this for the audience, Wes, or maybe you want to introduce it. You have your flash drives that you sell.
Oh, yeah. First of all, I sell videos. I make juggling videos. That I started making juggling videos for YouTube. Then when I was going to Sweden, I was a broke young man and was trying to make some extra money, and made like some longer juggling videos to sell on my website to sell the download. And then I've been doing that every few years since then. And my most recent one is Gumball, which you can still buy on my website, wespeden.com, if you want. Yeah, and then at IJA, I had these club-shaped flash drives that had almost all of my videos on them that I had for sale. And those are going to be for sale online at some point, but I'm still working with the guy who helps me make them. So if you're listening to this, you can check my Instagram or my Facebook, and they might be there, but it's still in process a little bit. Basically, I make videos and sell them.
And how do you make the videos, and how is it different than making something that's going to be on stage?
Yeah, they kind of feed each other a little bit because the reason I juggle is because I love the creation aspect of it. When I find a trick that I think is beautiful that I haven't seen before, and I'm like, oh man, I brought this trick to life. This looks so cool. I get so high from that. And there's a lot of tricks I can make that either are so hard that I'm like, do I love this trick enough to spend the like 5 years to get it solid enough to put it on stage? Or like, is it just enough to film it perfect once and then it can live on film? Or there's some tricks that are so small that they're not going to look good on stage, or they're so that I can't promise that I'm always going to have that high enough of a ceiling. So having videos really gives me a home to put these tricks that wouldn't fit that great on stage. And it also like gives me a place to really nerd out and make all the variations and weird tricks that I want. And then afterwards look back at this catalog when I'm making a new show and be like, oh yeah, these tricks are actually working and would fit in my new show. So they kind of, it goes back and forth that the videos feed the live shows, and then when I'm making live shows and think of tricks that don't work in the live show, I can put them in a video. So I always have a place for all the tricks that I like.
This podcast is brought to you by The Artist Athlete. Did you know that The Artist Athlete is more than just a podcast? It's a growing online resource for students of the aerial arts to deepen their journey to badassery by accessing techniques approved by physical therapists and master coaches in the industry. Our current spotlight is on the fundamentals of aerial alignment, a practical manual for hanging upside down. This online manual is a step-by-step guide. It is complete with photos, videos, and exercises that you can implement immediately to help you gain the strength and awareness you need for an aerial practice that promotes shoulder health and longevity and good posture upright, so you don't walk around like a gorilla. But don't just take my word for it. Here's CIRCUS physical therapist Dr. Jen Crane of Cirque Physio to tell you more.
The fundamentals of aerial alignment is an absolute must-have for every aerialist of every level. I can't even tell you how many shoulder injuries I treat that are a direct result of rushing past the basics in an attempt to get a trick too soon. In the manual, Shannon deconstructs the fundamentals, including the correct muscular engagement to safely arrive in these positions and the rationale for why it matters. Of course, in addition to all of these fabulous pearls of wisdom, the book is also ridiculously fun to read. It's been lovingly garnished with the Shannon humor we all know and love.
Thanks, Jen. Cirque Physio is also featured in the book to give scientific insight into why it all works. Pick up your copy today by going to theartistathlete.com and clicking e-manuals. Listeners of the podcast can get a 10% discount by typing in the offer code PODCAST at checkout. Again, that's theartistathlete.com, offer code PODCAST. Now, back to the show. Are there any tricks in the videos that you think will never work on stage?
Oh, so many.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them would work on stage if that was what I really cared about, was making that trick work on stage. There's things when I have 5 bouncy balls lined up in between my arms and I throw them and I jump over all 5 balls and catch all 5. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I could learn to do that every time on stage, but I never perform with bounce balls, and you never know about the floor. Do I need to bring like a marble slab to bounce on just to do that?
Yeah, those things are not light either. So.
Yeah. So I'm like, I guess technically I could get that one if I really wanted, but it was more just for the idea of this video section that's going to be funny and different. And I'm like, oh, hey, buddy, can I borrow your bounce balls? I got an idea. Cool, I did the trick. Like, yeah, a lot of them just fit better in a video context.
And how much of the rest of the art direction do you do? Because it's like very clear that there's an aesthetic going on outside of the juggling as well.
I like to paint. I like to read art magazines and cut up pictures from them and slap them together. I really like the graphics side as well, and I think it's fun to try to get an editing style that helps uplift the juggling. And a lot of times on stage, I'm a little bit limited to like what set design and what light I can have, but in videos, I can crop however I want, edit random stuff in to make a world. This digital world is much easier to manipulate than a physical one. So yeah, I'm spending tons and tons of hours editing, trying to make the tricks have a nice world to live in.
Another question I have going off of the videos is that, and I guess you've kind of already answered this, but I know a lot of people who started when they were kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like their parents were doing it and trained them up or something like this. And it seems like most of them, by the time they get to like their early 20s, they don't really want to do it anymore. But this clearly is not the case for you. Do you think it is about you that made you want to keep going and progress in juggling?
It depends your reason for juggling, whether you stick with it for a long time, because I love the creation aspect of it, and that's what keeps me into it. That is never gonna run out. There's always new things to find and new props to make and explore. And for me, the world of juggling just keeps getting bigger, because once you find like a new way of working and you got to apply it to all the different props, I don't know. Because I like creation, that's what keeps me excited, because that is never ending.
And how far in advance do you plan some of these things? Because like in Gumball, you have this part, you check off Gumball, right? You have this list. Mm-hmm. But then after that, there's a couple of more names. There's like the Weird Off. And so it gives the illusion that maybe you've like planned all this out like very far in advance.
Yeah, some of those names are not exactly what's coming next, but I always have there's stuff that I filmed during Gumball that didn't fit well in Gumball that I'm saving for the next project, and I always know like the next few videos and the next shows coming, but yeah, they all take a long time because everything's happening at the same time that I need to work on live shows as well as videos. I always have a couple notebooks going on the project after the next project. So yeah, there's stuff coming.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I think it's incredible how prolific you are at all of this stuff.
Yeah, I'm more of a quantity versus quality type of guy. I like making a lot of stuff, and then maybe something's gonna turn out okay.
Well, what's cool about it is you have the luxury of that because you started when you were so young. That a lot of the I don't know. I'm not a juggler, so maybe I'm just conjecturing. But yeah, a lot of the technical stuff you've kind of gotten out of the way. You don't have to sit there and figure out how to juggle 7 clubs.
Yeah. Well, I'm still trying to figure that one out. I was very lucky that my dad was curious about all the different props. So I have like basics in, almost every juggling prop there is. I've tried for a little bit. So there's a lot of head start I have on the technique. I'm very lucky in that way.
Do you ever choreograph other people?
Not really choreograph, but I love to do outside eye stuff and give advice. If someone sends me their juggling and is like, hey, what do you think about this? I find it really fun to be like, oh, actually that part when you have 2 clubs in that hand and you need to pick up this, it would be cool if you pass them under your leg because that makes your leg lift. And then when it goes down to kick up the other club, it makes more logical sense. How about trying that? And I get excited to help people with their work, or if they have some cool technique, new like trick idea, it's really fun to think of variations for them to try. So I don't really choreograph, but I really love hanging out with other jugglers and helping them think of new stuff to do with their tricks.
Yeah, something I love about jugglers, or it seems like in the juggler world, is you guys are very open sharing your information and your research.
Yeah, I think it's fun to like hang out and like, oh, what you working on? Oh, cool, I'm working on this. And I think when you're with people that you trust, that you're like, yeah, I know this person is like hardworking and doesn't kind of builds their own work, and I build my own work, we can get inspired by what each other is doing and don't feel like this guy might just steal my new ideas that aren't even ready yet and he's going to throw them in his show or whatever. When you have someone that you are like happy to share with, it is really nice, and the juggling community is really good for that.
Is there anything you keep to yourself, or that you feel like a particular ownership over, that you're like, no, that's not ready to be shared yet?
There are things I don't like to show until they're done, but it's not necessarily because I think someone's going to steal them. It's just more exciting when someone can see something when it's all the way finished and not just like pieces by pieces for a year until it's actually done. I have a friend, Eric Olberry, that came up with a crazy club technique that is really hard to explain over audio, but I'm going to give it a quick try. If and you
can always send video and stuff, and I can put the links in the show notes.
That's great. Okay, if you imagine a club, and the knob of the handle is underneath the chin with the head facing forward, and then the club goes diagonal back, so it's kind of sitting on the shoulder. Without touching it, it's kind of held underneath the chin and over the shoulder. And then when my friend Eric's holding the club there, and he turns his head down so the club falls off of his shoulder, swivels underneath his chin, and then up onto the other shoulder. Does that?
What?
So that is,
I just did it with my pen as you were describing.
Yeah, exactly. That's good. You had a prop to imagine it.
Yeah.
So that's like a technique that he came up with, and then developed crazy many variations and showed no one for like the 8 months he was working on it, like none of his friends or whatever. And then when I saw him perform it for the first time live, like me and Jay Gilligan, who I was watching it with, we were freaking out that like, what? He's been working on this, didn't tell anyone. Oh my God, this is insane. And it was such a strong effect that I think about that sometimes, that I'm like, okay, I'm not going to show anyone this until I'm done, because I realize how nice it is for the viewer to see all of a sudden something finished.
That's so hard. I don't know, for me, because I get really excited about my ideas and I want to share them with everybody.
Yeah. It's hard to like, especially now with like, Instagram and stuff, that's so easy to like post something right away. Oh, how do I save this until it's perfect? I want those likes right now.
Yeah. So if you had like an infinite amount of money and possibility, what would you make? Like if you could go to the moon and juggle, do you have like an ideal thing that you would create?
When I do think about what I would do with if I had unlimited money, it's often that I would hire other jugglers to do some crazy stuff. Like there's a lot of jugglers that I think have crazy ideas and potential, and I would love to see what they would do with a ton of money. Do you know this juggler Sean Blue from New York City? He does like crazy stuff, like spinning 3 balls on like one on his thumb, one on his first finger, and one on his pinky, all at the same time.
No, I don't know him, but that's really cool.
Yeah, he's an incredible like juggler and artist, and I'm like, man, what the hell would he do if he had like all this money? I would hire him, bring him here, hire this guy, and I think I would want to bring together a lot of jugglers and make like a group show and build a lot of props. I think the juggling prop world goes really slow because it's expensive to like make a new club in a new color or try a new size, and things move kind of at a snail's pace. I work with some prop manufacturers and things go so slow. So yeah, I think I would hire some jugglers to do some weird stuff and build a lot of cool props. If everyone just PayPals me $5, we can get that going.
Yeah, for sure. We'll send Wes $5 a pop.
Yeah, much appreciated.
And make a really cool show.
Yeah.
You live in Sweden?
Exactly. Yeah, Sweden's my base. Like I go wherever the shows are. So I'm in Helsinki at the moment, but I keep all of my juggling props in Stockholm.
That's a good metric for where you live.
Yeah, exactly.
I always say I pay my taxes in the States.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you think you'll ever come back to the States?
I don't think as a base. I did like a year in Las Vegas with a couple months in LA before that, and that was cool. Like I really love to visit there, and I love to visit my family in upstate New York. I don't know. I like the life in Stockholm a lot. I like hanging out in Belgium. Some places in France are really nice. So I think I really appreciate when I'm like, oh man, I have a couple months in New York. That's going to be great. But I don't know. I don't imagine myself having that as my base.
Well, we're kind of coming to the end of the interview. Is there anything else you want to add before I ask my final question?
Oh man, I'm curious about what your final question is. No, just everyone live your truth, believe in yourself, stuff like that. I think...
Okay, cool. Because that kind of leads into my final question.
Oh, perfect.
So maybe I'll let that happen. Because my final question that I ask everybody who comes on the show is, what advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of your career? And I'm going to let you define the beginning of your career however you want, because you've been doing this a while, since you were very young.
I would tell myself to stretch more. That was the beginning of my career and at the moment. I think that I should have just been more patient with everything. I think a lot of times I'm looking for something to work really quickly, and then in retrospect I see that everything does work out, and if I had given it a little bit more time it would have worked out even better. So I shouldn't try to push things to work faster than they want to in terms of like shows or when I get contracts and stuff like that, to just be patient and know that things will work in the right moment, and just to make the best show or the best video or the best act that I can. And also to not view anything as good news or bad news, because sometimes I've gotten a contract that I think is going to be the best and it actually is the worst. And sometimes when I end up hurting my ankle and I can't do anything for a few weeks, that was actually the time when I built my website, and then from my website I got this contact with got me these shows in Japan. So you never really know if something is good or bad, or that's what I'm starting to feel. So to just kind of be patient and be okay with anything that happens is what I would tell myself.
I have another question for you, actually. I was thinking about this as you were talking. You talked about when you were little, all you were doing was copying people's tricks. Do you think that that's a necessary part of the evolution of an artist? Do you think you have to go through a phase where you're copying other people, or do you think that there are some people who just are creating things from the get-go?
You need to learn some base technique before you can before you can really have a vocabulary to say what you want to say. It's very useful to learn how to juggle 3 clubs before you make 3 club tricks. Yeah, I think it is important to have a base of technique. It is a little weird when you first start juggling, because I'm okay, I'm going to learn 3 club back crosses, and everyone knows 3 club back crosses. You're not stealing someone's trick or doing anything strange, or you're going to learn Mills mess. It's not like anyone's going to be frustrated with you. But then when you first start juggling, you look into the world, it's hard to tell what is that guy's signature move and what is something that everyone's doing. And of course, someone's signature move can eventually turn into a staple that everybody knows. And it's kind of weird, that moment when eventually those things fade into what everyone does, and I'm not really sure how that moment works, But yeah, I think absolutely at the beginning, it's important to start with a base of juggling technique, so that when you go to make new stuff, you have your tools, and you don't have to think of a new trick and then have to learn how to do the most basic aspect of it. You can already have a toolbox of throws and catches.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Wes.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That was my interview with Wes Peden. I'm super thankful for Wes for taking the time to come on the show. I know that a lot of my listenership are not jugglers, though probably if you are a fan of Wes Peden's, you will have listened to this episode. But if you're not a juggler or a fan of juggling, I still recommend go to wespeden.com, WESPEDEN.com, or hop on YouTube and check out some of his work. It is, I promise you, not the traditional stand and throw a bunch of objects in the air kind of juggling. Wes's inspirations, his quality of movement, his approach, which you heard a little bit about in the interview, is so clear as he's creating things like Volcano vs. Palm Trees or Gumball or some of his solo work. And to really do it justice, I feel like you can't just listen to an interview with this artist. You really have to go experience it for yourself. So again, check out wespeden.com. You can also follow him on Instagram, Wes Peden. For aerial training and tips and information, you can follow me on Instagram at @the_artist_athlete. My website is theartistathlete.com. And if you want to help out the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/theartistathlete and become a Patreon today. Thanks so much for listening, guys. Next week on the podcast, we have Dara Minkin, who is Aerial Design on Instagram. She has a new book coming out, and I wanted to talk to her about it. So tune in for that. Until then, friends, fans, and enemies, have a great week. The Artist Athlete Podcast is supported solely by donations from people like you. Here's what some of those people have to say.
Hey there, friends, fans, and enemies. This is Chris Alston, Patreon of the Artist Athlete Podcast, straps artist and lyra performer and acrobat out of Greenville, South Carolina. So if you're ever passing through, make sure to stop in and see me and my friends. We have a wonderful space, and we'd love to see you.
Hi, my name is Erica Lee. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm an aerialist. I teach performing arts to elementary school during the day and do pole and slings and rope by night. I really, really like the Artist Athlete Podcast because it gives me a lot of circus goals to look forward to. It gives me a lot of insight on what's going on around the world in circus, and that's why I'm Patreon.
Hello, all. Thank you for tuning in to the Artist Athlete Podcast. I am Opal Schwartz from Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you're ever in the cities, feel free to stop by the Aviary Minneapolis. It's a great time. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and goodbye.